Economics with Tony D-Lo, back at it again, baby. This video, I'm going to tell you who really owns America's debt. Hint, it's not China, it's not Japan. Following through with my previous video on the Federal Reserve, it is the quasi-public private Federal Reserve Bank that owns America's debt. It is a myth that we are completely beholden to China. This debt includes all publicly held and all privately held debt, so student loans and whatnot, business debts and government debts. That 12.9 million figure includes all public and private debt in America, as well as pensions and Social Security. Notice this, too. China may be the largest holder of foreign debt with 1.25 trillion, but we owe more to the Federal Reserve Bank than we do with China. We owe 2.5 trillion to the Federal Reserve Bank. That is roughly 60% more than the amount that we owe to China. 1.25 trillion. Also, we owe a lot to Japan, too. Japan is closely approaching the amount of debt that we owe to China. 2.5 trillion versus 1.25 trillion. We owe 2.5 trillion to the Federal Reserve. This is how the Federal Reserve scam works. We could print United States notes issued by the Treasury. We could issue our own money. Instead of having United States notes, we have Federal Reserve notes. In other words, the money is not owned by our government and the Treasury. It's owned by the Federal Reserve. Our government borrows from the Federal Reserve, by the way, which is as Federal Express, with the promise to pay back with interest. And this cycle continues perpetually. But how do we pay back the Federal Reserve? The answer is we print money out of thin air. We print even more money to pay down the old debt, and then the interest rate increases constantly when you repeat the same cycle again. But it is a myth that the media is telling us that all of our debt we owe to China. We owe more to the private Federal Reserve Bank within our government, the Federal Reserve, which doesn't change. Puppets Obama, puppets Trump, puppet Bush, puppet Clinton. They don't control the Fed. They just keep the same system the way it is, the same system of creating debt out of thin air. The bankers and Goldman Sachs run this country. Obama's biggest donor was Goldman Sachs. You can check it out in the description. Donald Trump's people are all Goldman Sachs affiliated. Stephen Mnuchin, head of the Treasury, used to work with Goldman Sachs. Gary Cohn, chief economic advisor, used to be the president of Goldman Sachs. But this is who we owe the debt to. We owe more to the Federal Reserve than China. We need to repeal the Federal Reserve Act of 1913 and give ourselves control of our own money versus this quasi-public institution that has 12 regional banks, 12 regional corporations that serve the interests of Wall Street and the international bankers. So we need to get rid of the private bank debt slaves here that are ripping off America and its citizens and future generations. That is what the media won't talk about. Is these private bankers taking control of one of our institutions, creating an institution that they control. Federal Reserve is as federal as Federal Express. And we are nothing but debt slaves to the Federal Reserve. And both sides of the coin don't want to do anything about it, since they are nothing but puppeteers in control of the bankers.